Great. Well, thank you all so much for taking time out of your schedules this Wednesday to come meet with Clarissa and I to discuss our October training from the TTA Center, best practices for enough is enough managers and supervisors. We're really excited to deliver this training. We know that this has been highly requested, and that you all have been requesting some additional tools and resources to support your teams, and we're happy to provide that. So we're just going to go ahead and dive right in. As I've also shared, these slides will be recorded. I'll say it multiple times, but don't feel like you have to write down absolutely everything. You'll receive a recording and you'll receive access to the slides. So, as we're getting started, hopefully you know who I am unless you just started your job absolutely yesterday and you've never seen us before. But my name is Tracia Banuelos-Rovaris. I go by Trey. I use she, they pronouns, and I am the downstate training and technical assistance consultant with the New York City Alliance Against Sexual Assault. I've been engaging in campus sexual violence prevention and response since about 2015, 2016. I was a very active student on my campus. So I was a regional advisor for the It's On Us group in the Midwest region in Kansas, where I'm from. And I've continued to kind of build on some of that student work and student activism, doing work both in campuses. I've worked in upstate New York at a private liberal arts campus doing direct services with survivors and prevention education, and happy to be back at the Alliance supporting TTA. I'm very passionate about research, very passionate about program evaluation, facilitation, training. Those are my breads and butter. So I'm really excited to speak with you all about those things and continue to support. Clarissa, I'd love if you want to take a moment to introduce yourself.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. Clarissa Espinoza, she, her, ella, Director of Programs here at the Alliance. I have been part of Enough is Enough since the very beginning. I don't want to date myself, but since the very beginning in New York State, back to the DOH days, very happy to see all the supervisors in the room. This has been a long time coming. I'm happy that it's being recorded to be shared amongst all of us that I couldn't be here today, but I'm just really excited to share this space and hopefully have more of a dialogue and not us just talking to you, but hearing for like what your needs are to best support those people doing the groundwork with college campuses. So just excited to be here.
Thank you, Carissa. And yes, we are hoping that we can have a little bit more of a dialogue. We will have a couple of spaces we kind of get into our agenda. We'll have a couple of moments where you all can engage and also bring questions. So right now we're in our introductions and housekeeping. We're right on schedule. As a reminder, again, the session is being recorded and slides will be posted to the website. We'll then kind of right after this moment of the agenda go into a quick Mentimeter. I love having tools that don't require you to speak, but give you a lot of information. So I'll ask that you all participate in that Menti. We'll walk through it. It's very similar to Poll Everywhere, one of those digital presentation platforms. Then from that moment, we'll take a brief moment to look at a resource that we've kind of done a manager's toolbox. So we'll share a slide that's at a glance, has some information on what are the tools that you need to be a successful manager and kind of where to find those tools. We'll then also spend some time then talking about the EIE work plan. If you have never heard of the phrase work plan, then I'm so glad that you're here because we will talk about it. We'll do a couple of screen share moments. So I just ask that you keep that in mind there. We may pause the session. It's only because we're just shifting screens. No one's internet is freaking out. There's no Zoom issues. We're just kind of pivoting a bit. And we'll also discuss who is the TTA Center, what we're able to offer, and we'll also look at the work plan and a couple of other resources. We'll also then, after we kind of go through the work plan, go through some of the contacts and tools, kind of spend time today talking about onboarding and then more directly supervising EIE staff. So we'll kind of talk about what are some things that you should be keeping in mind as you are onboarding your staff. What are a couple of things to do within the first week versus the first year, or the first month? When do you loop in the TTA Center? So we'll kind of spend some time talking about that. And then we will close with a discussion. I'll kind of ask Clarissa a couple of predetermined questions that are very common from managers and supervisors. We have a couple of notes around themes that you should be confident, or themes that you should feel comfortable discussing with your supervisees, but we'll also have space for questions. So if you brought questions, there are two ways to kind of go about that. First, you can share your questions within the Mentimeter. We'll have a moment where you can ask very direct questions anonymously. So maybe that, if case that helps, then you can You can also, of course, put it into the chat or message myself and Clarissa. But keep it full in mind that we will have to kind of scroll back. So I would really suggest using the Mentimeter as a space to kind of grapple your questions when we get into that Q&A part. And then we'll close with a couple of next steps and things to kind of keep your eyes out. And I think 90 minutes will go by pretty darn fast. And so with that, we'll just go ahead and keep getting into our next pieces. And as a little bit of a scaffolding, because we love talking and we love being thorough and clear, we really wanted you all to kind of know what were we hoping that you walked away from today's session with. And that really buckles down into three things. We hope that you feel comfortable navigating the work plan and understanding and seeing kind of what strategies exist to help you navigate the work plan and submitting reports. We also are really hoping that you will feel comfortable accessing the resources that are provided by the TTA Center and knowing exactly who to get in contact with for your specific needs. And we're also hoping that you have some supervision resources then that you can feel at least leaving this meeting. Maybe you're really confident in the work plan. Maybe you're really strong in the TTA Center resources, but you're not exactly sure what questions you should be asking, or you're kind of having challenges in supervision. Well, then you also have this space with Clarissa here to kind of ask some of those questions and maybe even share if you're having any of those specific concerns. So this is our kind of our three pillars. We will also have a training evaluation. And I really do ask that you all fill out that evaluation so that we can make sure that we're giving you what you are hoping to expect in this session and to also create things for our next session. We have time, and perhaps if we need to do, another managers meeting or two more trainings, we can do that. And so that evaluation is really that space to let us know what you need in addition to that. So we're going to do our Menti here in just a second. I'm going to stop my screen share as we kind of get to this platform. I encourage Mentimeter for a lot of folks. If you went to the EIE convening and you were in the 201 session, you saw that I used a Mentimeter. I really enjoy this. I feel like it's a very user-friendly space, and you get 50 free users a month on a free account. So if you're like, I want a presentation tool and I want it to be free, then you have that one. So I'm going to ask that everyone, I'm going to actually share the instructions on the next slide. To participate in the Menti, there are two ways. You can either go to menti.com and enter this code or scan when the QR code is here. I'm going to go off on mute real quick to get some water so I can stop talking. And as someone has already done, feel free to like right here when you have select or when you're at this page and you're signed in. And that way I know that we can go ahead and go past our instruction slide. We'll give it about 40 more seconds for the other folks who are still waiting to join. All right, in facilitator math, that was 40 seconds, and we're going to get started. So first, just to kind of do get a bit of a temperature check. Would love to know how long you've been in the field. If you're newer to the field, less than a year, but go ahead and click along this scale. How long you have been in the anti-violence or the sexual violence prevention and response field? Awesome. I love seeing the wealth that we of knowledge that we have in the room. Hopefully, we have a little bit that everyone across this space can feel excited about. So, well, as this question asked how long you have been inside the field, the next question is how long have you been managing Enough is Enough staff? And given that Enough is Enough is only about 10 years old, I have a 5+ years for some of the folks who've been here since the beginning. So it seems like we can already see in real time. I love tools like this that just let you see live. I love living in the 21st century. We have a lot of folks here who have been managing supervise or has been supervising staff for about less than a year. So that's really great because I think this presentation will be very much catered to your needs. Folks who've been here for 5 years and who've been in the fields for over 20 years, please also feel free to share your expertise in the chat. If someone poses a question or if you have a strategy or a resource or a tip, we definitely want to access the wealth of knowledge in the room. So please don't be shy. Go ahead. I love a good humble brag. So if you're doing something really great, share it in that chat. We can also include it in the follow up resources. Here we have two kind of slide scales. So the first question, you kind of slide whether not at all or absolutely, kind of right where you are when if you understand the EIE work plan. Again, if you've never heard of work plan, go ahead and put that not at all. This is a scale of 1 to 5. Or if you're like, I have this plan memorized, it's tattooed on my forehead. Go ahead and be on that on the absolutely. And the same for the TTA center. All right, we're pretty in the middle. This is as a facilitator, this is really fun to have a lot of knowledge in the room. Back and forth. Here, this is a space now that you can, this is not a word cloud, so you feel free to kind of type full thoughts or fragmented sentences, but we'd really love to know what challenges are you having when it comes to supervising Enough is Enough staff, and what specific questions do you have? Thank you all for sharing. I'm going to kind of uplift what these are. I know we have a couple of folks on the phone. So some of the answers that were being shared are non-responsive schools and admin. Whew, this is just, yes. Turnover of staff or not having enough staff or resources. Turnover of Title IX. Again, not enough staff. Being a new supervisor and having not supervised someone before, feeling just generally lost. The ever evolving Title IX landscape, resources, navigating different expectations across campuses, facilitation, prevention skills. Oh, your supervisor isn't supportive. So you're a supervisor trying to support someone, but you don't have the support. Great to keep that in mind. Lack of feedback on grant reports. So submitting those but hoping you get a little bit more information and not receiving that. Being familiar with our work plan and campus and goals new to the position. So really kind of just adjusting in the whole of it, the EIE of it. Only one person is doing the work and no one else knowing the work. That is a recipe, I think, also sometimes for burnout of being that sole person who's holding it and not necessarily having folks that can talk about it, understand. Confusion on using approved curriculum. Okay. Part-time staff and the difference between Title IX and EIE. Awesome. I'm not sure if we'll be able to get to all of these pieces today, but this will definitely help us have a temperature check for maybe a follow-up session, an hour-long session or something where we can discuss some more of these. But hopefully we'll be able to get to these today. And I think we only have one more. Oh, nope, that's the final question. Awesome. Great. Thank you all so much for participating. I'm going to stop the screen share real quick and go back to my slides. Give me about 15 seconds. Okay, thank you all so much for participating in that Mentimeter. This really helps us get a temperature check. So some things we wanted to start off so that you all could, have the tools and know kind of what tools exist. This slide at a glance is designed so that you can one kind of use these slides as a toolkit and have a quick reference on kind of things that you should be familiar with. And some things for your agency and some potential recommendations. Clarissa, also feel free to jump in if there's anything that you kind of back up. I get super excited in these moments and just start talking and forget that I'm in a group. I'm in a duo. So what I name that.
You're good.
Thank you. So here we have across three different spaces, one tools and resources that you have from the funder, OPDV, the Office for the Prevention of Domestic Violence. Also, then in the middle, the kind of in the shaded area, what are some things that your agency should have, and so maybe even some goals to have some of these things. And finally, we'll kind of close with what are some of here what the TTA Center will share. This is also not the only moment that we will talk about these resources, but I wanted to kind of place this here because first we'll kind of go through again, we'll go through the work plan, we'll see some of these pieces, and I wanted to highlight that the work plan is a tool for you all. Then we'll go into onboarding, their workshop, and close it some more with the TTA. So this is just not the only time that we will share it, but I wanted to have it all in one space. So again, we'll go through the grant work plan, so I won't discuss it too much about it, but just as a reminder, this is something that a tool that identifies what are the enough is enough activities. But again, we'll go through that, so I won't spend too much time. And we'll also touch on the quarterly and annual reports today. We'll also show you the reports. I did also want to highlight that OPDB does have quarterly grantee calls. Ideally, everyone, at least your all providers, should be receiving those. So if there's a world where somehow you're not receiving OPDB communications, I'll also show you a slide of who to contact as your grant manager to make sure that you have the correct information. And when you download these slides, everyone's emails are hyperlinked so that you can click it and send an email very easily.
And also just feel free to let me know right now if like, hey, I never got those emails, because I can start connecting you to the right people to get you on those listservs.
Thank you, Clarissa. Awesome. And then finally, I really wanted to amplify some of the published reports. I have a master's in social research. I'm a nerd. So when someone I think data is love. So when someone has put data together, I really like to show it. And OPDV has published for the last 2 years annual reports of all, that's a collation of all of the efforts across the state for enough is enough providers. So definitely feel free to check out those reports if you haven't. I think this can really help make sense of what is the point, where is all this information going when you see the state at that macro level. Personally, it helps me feel like, you know what, I'm part of something larger. Or we have a little piece of this pie. So again, both of those reports are hyperlinked here. Definitely would think it would be great to review this for yourself and get familiar with the efforts that are happening across the state.
And I send the links here for you so you can all look at it now if you want to.
Thank you. So as we get into kind of what are some agency resources, I do want to name that, there may be a world where your agency may not have all of the tools. So I put these together as kind of some strong suggestions, and I'm going to kind of go through them one by one and share kind of what value these bring in setting your staff up for success. So the first one, I kind of have this for agency in two buckets: one, institutional records, and then training and supervision. These institutional records that you all keep are life-saving. They're foundational, and they are things that when I'm also onboarding enough is enough providers, we can continue to have conversations together and be very strategic. When you are kind of putting together a history of partnerships, what you can then include is who are the schools that you have MOUs with? Who are the schools that you've tried to have MOUs with? Who are the schools that you want to, but you haven't got there quite yet? I think having a healthy mix of quantitative information, such as when you reached out, maybe how often you've reached out, but also qualitative information, such as this school's had a lot of turnover, this position has been vacant, anything that can help someone who's new to the role fill in as many of the gaps so that they can effectively do the job. Quite often, um, Or I also say any information that can be helpful when people are beginning, maintaining, or salvaging a relationship, I think it is very useful. It also is very helpful as folks are having a turnover, having a history of partnerships can help us be strategic about what does it mean then to reach back out. Or maybe, if there used to be someone at that school who is at a different school or an agency, it just helps us paint a fuller picture of how to engage with the non-responsive schools. Is the school non-responsive or is that contact non-responsive? And does that contact have someone that they're actually funneling this information to, but they haven't kind of made that point? So I recommend for everyone having some type of information, even a single one pager of when information or when relationships were built and some issues could be helpful. I'm always going to be an advocate for a long toolkit or a guide, but I think if you shoot for the stars and land somewhere, sometimes the providers are starting these roles and are feel like they're starting over and reinventing the wheel, and that doesn't necessarily have to occur. So looking at also from previous reports, looking and seeing when MOUs were together, pulling data that you already have and putting it in a space that can be helpful is just such a helpful onboarding tool.
I
And
was
that
just
takes oh, go
sorry.
ahead, go ahead.
I was gonna add, because oftentimes we hear about the consistent turnover in a lot of our programs. And one of the things that has been very valuable that I've heard people have used is when people are transitioning out, if you didn't have the historical or institutional records of like previous partnerships ever, and you're starting to build that, when they're transitioning out, that's usually a good time to intervene and say, like, well, if you're leaving in 3 weeks, can in the next 2 weeks, can you give me the institutional records of all the institutions that you've come in contact? Can you give me a synopsis of where you are with each school? Sometimes there's always a missed opportunity. We feel because people are transitioning out, they don't owe anything to the organization, but you can ask for people to say, to give you a report of where they are with each school so that you can easier transition the new person or while you're covering for that position, especially if you haven't been somebody that has been on the ground working, but you want to maintain some level of relationship while that new person comes into the team.
Thank you for that. And I think also as folks are exiting, they can be more honest actually have and haven't done. So thank you, Carissa, for updating that this is a right moment to get some information that will really set up the next person for success. I think this leads really well into train the trainer guides. Quite often, a lot of times when I am working with new providers, sometimes they know that they have to do some type of prevention education, so they'll receive a whole lot of PowerPoints. But and sometimes they'll get a directive to update those PowerPoints. But without a train the trainer guide, they're not necessarily sure what to update or why some information was there. So a lot of times they're kind of working backwards and unsure exactly where to go, or unsure of what exactly are the clear requirements to meet because they're inheriting the final product of someone else's work instead of any tools that kind of helped along the process there. So I'm a strong advocate for train the trainer guides always. Let me know if having a template, for a train the trainer guide would be helpful too. These types of things are things that the TTA Center can help with. We've also touched on transition things that kinda to talk about as staff is exiting, but also having a transition memo, is such a strong tool. I would even suggest, having some type of memo, that each outgoing EIE provider can update and contribute to add information on how they navigated challenges, things that they had noticed but weren't able to action yet. You never know if one person, for example, maybe you had someone previously as a provider who is really great at prevention and education, but was not so great at outreach. And they had all these ideas of places to do outreach, but they didn't action on it because that wasn't their skill set. And maybe your news person does have that skill set. So leaving places where folks can have an ongoing conversation about how they've to responded to EIE activities. And then I'll also say handoff meetings with campus partners. Quite often, sometimes as we're very busy, sometimes or maybe we've had a position that's been vacant for a while, and so we would like to do a couple handoff emails. Hey, here, Title IX coordinator, this is my new person. They'll be taking over communications from now on. Good luck. Everything's great. Goodbye. I'm gonna recommend that folks have handoff meetings of some sort with some of key personnel. One, to have that space to discuss the to discuss, to have questions, to close the loop and submit those points of contacts. I'm always going to think it's easier to follow up on a conversation that you already had verbally than one that has only existed in text where you have no tone. It may be a lot in the moment, but these meetings can give you such a high level of information. It can also help you see from another view where your EAE provider may either be strong at campus partner meetings or could use some support. So it's a really great data point. Then, kind of finally, in this area, the two things that I want to emphasize are a clear onboarding plan and regular supervision. We'll discuss some more onboarding, but I want to reiterate that having a clear onboarding plan helps all involved. While the TTA Center can do your direct enough is enough onboarding, we also recognize that sometimes many of EIE providers serve dual roles. So there needs to be some clarity and consistency around what does that dual role mean? What exactly are the other expectations of their role that are not necessarily folding into EIE? What does it mean to have a dual role? So some of those things are that can be the seeds that can be planted from the beginning. We can work together to continue to water, but our onboarding is that really right moment to navigate that. And finally, some regular supervision on challenges and deliverables. And again, we'll discuss this later. For the TTA Center, we have a couple of various resources. As a staff, again, we can do direct onboarding and meet with your EIE provider and or yourself bi-weekly, monthly, however often we need to make sure that you all are understanding what it means to be an enough is enough provider. What are those expectations and kind of work through some of the questions. Now that you understand the work plan or understand pieces where you may be having some challenges with practically implementing the work. We also we have monthly trainings that we coordinate. We respond to individual requests, and we also have regional calls across our or quarterly regional calls. We're also really happy to continue to share the website. We have a provider portal that we're trying to consistently to encourage folks to use. This provider portal does have a password. If you don't have the password, feel free to mention in the chat, and Clarissa or myself can respond to a private message with you with the password. But this is a tool where you can have both, you can start discussion boards, we'll share resources. I also say for folks to do, again, a humble brag. But this is a space where this, even though we're across, 52 agencies, we can all work together in this very closed portal space. I think it would be a great goal for EIE providers who are doing things really well. As a manager, encourage them to post to the portal, encourage them to post what they're doing and seeing where other folks can pick up those strategies and continuing to kind of foster that collaboration. We'll show some more, but enough is enough. This work does not work without relationships, and we maintain those relationships through things like these discussion boards. We also have 9 onboarding videos that are on the website. We'll have some links within here as well, but these onboarding videos are tools from the TTA Center to understand what is EIE law, what is primary prevention, how do I work with colleges, some very foundational introductory material that can be really helpful for both folks who have never worked with campuses or folks who kind of have some idea but need to adjust it to campus environments. And finally, we also have a repository for toolkits. So as a snapshot, quite a lot of resources to go about the enough is enough work. So I wanted to kind of begin this and ground our conversation continuing on answering what exactly is enough is enough. There is no shame in this space if you're like, I have no idea what that means. So I wanted to kind of set up and remind folks that enough is a state law. It was established in 2015, and it's a state education law that requires campuses and universities to be very intentional and thoughtful around the resources, campaigns, and how they support students in responding and preventing sexual violence, domestic violence, dating violence, and stalking. I also like to share with folks again, because New York State is, because enough is enough, I mean, excuse me, is state law. I also want to remind folks that the responsibility is on the campus to demonstrate their compliance. Sometimes we hear a misconception that enough is enough providers are compliance officers or they're here to support Title IX work. And I want to very clearly clean up that neither are necessarily true. Enough is enough providers are folks who can support campuses in achieving their requirements. We have special skills around trauma informed care, facilitation, understanding what it means to support a survivor. But we're not compliance officers. That's not how we're set up. And I don't even think that Title IX is in the work plan, maybe like once or twice. Title IX is federal legislation. We had a training last month about what is Title IX and the difference between EIE, and I'll make sure that folks see that that training is updated to the website as soon as it is possible, so that folks can have that understanding. But I wanted to kind of outline that here, enough as providers are here to support campuses in there and their policies, making sure that they're trauma informed care and making sure that policies are clearly communicated to students, that they make sense, that there's a uniform definition of affirmative consent that's across the entire state. So the worth one student, was at NYU and they transfer to SUNY Oneonta, there's not varying definitions of what was consent on that campus to another one. And a couple of other things. So again, there is a video on the TTA website, a couple of resources to understand what enough is enough is. This webinar overview with enough is enough was updated this year. It's a 20-minute video. I facilitated. So please feel free to check that out. Watch it with your staff, remind folks. But this kind of breaks down again, what is EIE? What are some of the mandatory populations? Because there are. So we take quotes from the law and just kind of walk through why does this what does this societal approach to sexual violence prevention look like in practicality, and why does it really matter? And I also wanted to highlight that we have a couple of information here. So within the law itself, I wanted to show exactly where the Student Bill of Rights information is located, and also highlighting that sexual assault victims and DV survivors have a Bill of Rights that are also on OPDV's website. So plenty of information throughout this presentation.
And I'm just sharing live links with everyone, FYI.
So we're going to now kind of thank you, Clarissa, and also get into our presentation discussing the work plan. And first, how I'm going to just kind of set us up is talking about what a work plan is and provide an overview of it. And then there will be a moment where I'll pause and we'll actually kind of look through it and work through it. So again, it's because enough is enough is state law. It's encouraged campuses to enter in these collaborative partnerships with rape crisis centers and victim advocacy programs to prevent and respond to violence with strategy and intention. One of the things that I love about supporting this grant is how thoughtful it is and how many resources exist to help you do some intentional research. Just for example, when you do the needs assessment, thinking through as providers walking through the websites of schools and seeing how difficult or easy it may be to report something or to find resources. So I think there's a lot of thoughtfulness put into these resources. So as I get through the work plan, just to define a work plan, it's a roadmap. It details the objectives, activities, timelines, and the resources for effectively implementing a funded project. So if you are someone who's newer to supervision and supporting grants, a work plan is not just EIE language, it is grant language. It is something that helps you navigate understand that there's clarity between both the funder and the person receiving the funds on what exactly you were supposed to do, and a guide at the preemptively on how to do those things. So as a brief overview before we do a brief moment of screen share, I want to mention that for all folks who receive EIE funding, each work plan is the same. There's not a special like this work plan has this and that one has that. It's the same work plan. It's 8 pages, and there are 7 main objectives that we'll kind of go through and discuss a little bit. I'll also show you some kind of information or indicators on how to achieve each one. But the 7 main objectives are sequenced across 3 years. So it starts with year 1. Here goes some suggestions for how to start partnerships, how to concretize them, and work towards up to year 3 where you're having more strategy, collaboration, and what it could look like again every year scaffolding what you're doing. I'm gonna pause for a moment, get some water.
And I'll just add, we are currently in year 3 of the contract. So just if you didn't know that, because we usually get people like, well, where are we? We're currently in year 3, quarter 2.
Yes, thank you. And so there's descriptions of the time frame of what's expected, activities, and then performance measures for each part. So it's very, very clear on when to do what suggested activities. This grant is also non-competitive and favors collaboration. I like to just reiterate for everyone that the entire goal of the Enough is Enough program is student well-being and campus safety. We're working together to make sure that survivors have access to a wealth of resources. So it's this a spirit of competitiveness is not necessarily part of EIE because there may be some resources that one agency has that another doesn't have. So we work together. So just wanted to name that very intentionally. And kind of putting it all together because the work plan also sets some clear language for as we move into the reports. The work plan describes the expectations of the funding, but then there's a quarterly report and an annual report that describe what work was performed in alignment with the work plan. So I'm going to pause for this moment. We'll see if we have any questions, but I'm now going to go and open up the work plan. I think this is the moment that yes, to kind of talk through the work plan and some of these objectives. Or actually, I think I'll just go ahead and just share them one by one, and then we'll do that work plan because that it's just an 8-page document, and I want to make sure folks are set up for success before we get it. So that my bad on that piece.
I do have a question that I wanted to post was sent to me. If there was any, and this is an OPDV question, if there was any information about the future procurements for these, are they going to remain non-competitive? So some programs are getting ready to forecast their budgets for next year.
Yep. So procurement processes are not able to be discussed until they're announced. So we will be announcing procurement processes over probably the next couple months. And that's all the information I can provide.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So looking at the work plan and the objectives. So again, number one, each work plan is the same. You'll have some resources to contract your OPDV grant manager if you don't have a copy of your work plan. So the 7 objectives are very methodical and build upon each other. The first objective is it's partnership with colleges and universities. This is exactly how it looks on the work plan. So trying to kind of demystify that process. And here it asks you to establish or review and update memorandum of understanding, MOU, such a long mouthful, MOU agreements, and or collaborative partnerships with colleges and universities in this area. There are a couple of resources that will show, but thinking methodically, we're getting set up to have partnerships. That's where we start. Sometimes a lot of folks get caught in this idea of you have to have an MOU to engage in a partnership with the campus, and that is not true. You don't have to have an MOU to do this work. We recognize that there are challenges. Some of the institutions that you work with that are quite large or are private institutions are very hesitant to sign anything, or they have, a multi-month process through a general counsel. The goal of the MOU is not just to sign partnerships and have some type of checklist. The goal is to have two-way clarity and communication between the school and your agency of what exactly that campus needs, what they need you for, what you can do, and also what they will do to support you and how you will support each other. So we'll also show here, there's a couple of resources on the website. I'll highlight them kind of later, but this is where we start. And I wanted to provide some clarity that, again, MOUs are not required. They're there to be clear around that two-way. But let's say you and a campus have a great relationship, then there can be a letter of partnership or something that you write together that just says, we work together. This is what we're looking at. We want to make sure that we have tabling and 2 workshops during Domestic Violence Awareness Month, after spring break, and Sexual Assault Awareness Month. They're to be thoughtful. The second then gets into needs assessments and planning. Here you develop or update a plan to address needs of the colleges or campuses related to EIE requirements, and then annually assess the needs of each campus that informs the plan. Again, there are toolkits on the website. You'll see a link, but these needs assessments are here to help give you some resource tools on making sure that you are researching and fulfilling those requirements of what EIE requires. These tools were also updated in 2023. So there's also both a guide, there's a guide for MOUs and a guide for needs assessment, and then template tools themselves. And I will also say a lot of some of the onboarding and work that I work with young people, sorry, I'm going back to my teacher days, working with EIE providers is also saying when have you done a needs assessment? What does that look like? What did you find? And sometimes more often than not, some folks have started it, but they're like, or they think, oh, I download this and I send it to a campus and they fill it out. No, there's quite a bit of research that you do on your own to be thoughtful and to be strategic. The idea is to walk into campus meetings having had some idea of what you want to recommend, but still being open enough to respond to what they suggest. Then the third objective is reporting on information on anonymous reporting. So this is around providing information about the methods to anonymously disclose an incident of violence, including relevant confidential hotlines by agencies and non-for-profit entities. So when folks are like, what should I be sharing? You should be sharing information on anonymous reporting. You should be including this in slides that you're doing. These should be included in social marketing materials. And then we'll also see, again, in the performance measures, why this is on what this looks like, and you'll see in your grant report. So each horizontal row of that work plan is so pertinent. The final number 4 is about information and services for student victims. This one's about providing information for survivors of sexual assault, as well as survivors of domestic violence, dating violence, or stalking through referrals to an advocate within your agency or within an outside agency. So again, what should your person be including in their workshops? What should they be making sure? What should they be having at tabling? Information on how to receive resources, how to get referral, if there's short-term counseling. So things that help survivors not feel alone, and tools to receive resources and start their healing journeys. For the objective number 5, awareness events and campaigns. So part of this ongoing then commitment is having regular awareness events or campaigns that demonstrate prevention on campuses. This is where some of that culture shift comes in, and where we're doing these types of campaigns to demonstrate that the community that the campus is a part of is not tolerant of sexual assault, and is also invested in building students' skills and capacity to have healthy conversations, to have healthy boundaries with each other, and know their resources. So part of these long-term goals would be having these types of campaigns and events that folks can look forward to. And also, we recognize that students respond to thematic programming. So sometimes October for DVAM and April are those times that folks are willing to talk about these. So it would be remiss to not intentionally take advantage of those months. Objective 6 then is now training and prevention education. So providing trainings on sexual assault on campuses that include but aren't limited to the definitions and information that's within the EIE law itself. There's access to that on the TTA website, and we can show you where to find it. Information on prevention education and bystander intervention training. So again, there's not a requirement exactly to use an evidence-based program for those pieces, but there is a requirement that this information should define what sexual violence is. There should be some information that understands and works through a primary prevention model. There is a separation between primary prevention and bystander, and being thoughtful about what that means, and that having training materials that make sense to students as well. And then finally, the last objective is collaborating with local community partners on the prevention and response to campus sexual assault, again, including but not limited to colleges and universities, local and state law enforcement, a district attorney's office, and other service providers and EIE providers that are applicable. So again, the work plan is very focused, very supportive of collaboration, and if we were, like, for example, you're a brand new EIP provider, in year one, you would have started with kind of like MOUs, formalizing partnerships, and you build and scaffold on each of these pieces. So now I'm going to pause and show you the work plan. Clarissa, feel free to just jump in if there's anything that I've missed while I do this.
No, I think all of this would also at the end when we're doing like the Q&A, or like I'm bringing insight to what a supervision would look like. A lot of these topics are going to resurface because a lot of these things are tools that you're going to be able to use when you're providing that supervision and support of going back to always a work plan. Like the work plan is going to be like, well, like Bible, like literally you're going to go back to it and you're going to say, have you done these? Like, and cross-reference every effort to best support the staff that are doing the work.
Thank you. So hopefully I set you up for success. Now that you see the work plan, you don't feel overwhelmed by it. We won't go through all of it, but as I showed again, here goes the overview. There's 8 pages. All of the objectives that I just read are right here on this far left column. Let's take, for example, even just kind of starting here for this needs assessment. It's one of my favorite ones. What I read, the objective name that you saw on the slides, the objective that I read, very clear when to do this. So it's something you do every year. So you do it year 1, year 2, and year 3. Then what is specific activities that mean? So when folks are like, what do I do to do objectives? For the second objective, you meet with colleges and universities. If they haven't identified their needs, you offer to help with needs. And then the performance measures and indicators of how you have achieved each of these pieces. So again, the goal is to be very, very clear and provide a guide on what it means to work through to fulfill the requirements of this work plan. And strategically, the language used in quarterly reports and languages that we use are also trying to take direct quotes so that it doesn't seem like you've never heard awareness events and campaigns, so that this language is quite comfortable. So hopefully this is something that helps really explain and clarify again what exactly you're supposed to be doing, how, when, and what that looks like. But yes, this is the work plan. So again, if you don't have a copy of this, feel free to reach out to your OPDV grant manager. And yes, so let me go to this next piece. So now that we've kind of went through the work plan, I wanted to take a moment to then also set us up for our conversations around reports. So as a quick, TLDR, too long, didn't read, the work plan sets the expectations for the funding. But then we have our reports, our quarterly reports and annual reports. If you haven't submitted your annual report, please do so. And these are your opportunities to convey that you're meeting the expectations of the funding. I wanted to put this very clearly here too, to also again demystify what that process is. None of this information should be brand new or seem random. It's all very thoughtful, intentional. And I'm also going to show you after I mentioned this piece, we're going to even walk through what the quarterly report looks like and the annual report, just to make sure that while we're in this moment, you're familiar with both. I also wanted to note too that your quarterly report also then kind of attests to the work that's being done and the payment that's being requested on your quarterly fiscal cost report, the FCR that's submitted for your claim. So those quarterly reports are very, very, very important. Feel free to share any questions now while I pull up those so that you all can see them. Right here. So hopefully everyone can see, I think everyone can see my screen. I use my Microsoft in dark mode because it's hard on my eyes. So this is what the quarterly report looks like. You click along what quarter you're a part of. All of those staffing updates that you have go right here. This is super important so that we at the TTA Center and the funder have an understanding of who is working on the grant and who should be receiving information and emails. And we'll just see again. So the same objectives, information, on anonymous reporting, the same objectives that we worked through from the work plan. Hopefully all this is kind of then coming together and making sense on why this information is required, and what this looks like. So we always recommend that when you hire a new staff member to go over the work plan and to continue to revisit it so that folks get comfortable with this language. But this is our quarterly report. This is what this looks like now that we've reviewed it. And I also want to share the annual report. Can I get a thumbs up, Clarissa? Did it switch or is it still showing the other one? Okay, great. So then we have our annual report, which takes some of this information from a larger annual, a macro look and putting it together. So hopefully this now all makes sense now that we've kind of went through what they're all asking for and why. Yeah, go ahead, Clarissa.
I was gonna plug that, in right now we're kind of like fast tracking through the work plans and the annual reports. But if you wanted to just do like a 101, the TTA is not just support like the direct staff. We can support you as a supervisor, so we can definitely review much more in detail with you either the reports and the work plan itself as well.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, we still want to make sure that we're still going with our time. So I just want to make sure that you all see this. But yes, we can definitely go over this with you all. All right. Does it show my Canva presentation? Can I get it? Perfect. Oh, I love the 21st century. So to be very clear here, we have I wanted to have in a screenshotable space who exactly your contacts are or your grant managers for where you are located in the state. So if you are in the upstate regions, your contact is Kristen Luke. If you are in the central, western, northern, or southern, her email is shared right here. And then if you are in the lower regions, air horn, you have Dulcie as a contact. You are Lower Hudson, Long Island, and New York City. I also wanted to share then that you can reach out to your OPDV grant manager about your work plan, about grant reports, fiscal questions, and staffing updates. I cannot reiterate enough that as a TTA center, we do not handle the fiscal responsibilities. The fiscal concerns are not things that we have access to or provide information around. So please, please, please contact your grant manager for if you have questions there. I'm gonna take a sip of water real quick.
I can just go over the next slide if you want, Trey. So the TTA Center is composed of two organizations, one being the New York State Coalition Against Sexual Assault, and then the other being the New York City Alliance Against Sexual Assault. And so if you belong to the Central, Western, Northern, or Southern part of the region, then your contact is Niscasa, and that is Dishpo and Demetra. And if you are downstate, then your point of contact is Trey or myself. And again, you can ask us about onboarding, work plans, quarterly reports, resources, best practices. If you have a scenario that has come up recently with an administrator or a student, you feel free to reach out to us for some consultation on that and just any support in general. No question that you can pose. The worst that we can answer is that we don't have an answer, but we'll get back to you with an answer. Trey and I are very big on that. And so if we don't know something, we will make sure that we'll get back to you with some referrals or some resources. But also, I also want to plug in the website and the community forum. Like that is also a space. Like sometimes we have a scenario that we're experiencing with a student. And if you put in the community forum, multiple people across the state can also tap in and provide some insight as to what they're currently experiencing, if they have similar experiences and or if they have resources and referrals for that student. So just there's different ways that you can communicate with us, but there's also different ways that you can build collaboration amongst each other across the state. So you're not alone essentially ever in this work.
Yes, thank you. I also again amplified that we have here, there's a general just form on the website that you can put for general contacts. And then when you download these slides, these are hyperlinked exactly to Dishpal, Demetra, myself, and Carissa's emails. I also have a booking link in all of my emails so that folks can schedule a meeting based on their calendar. So yes, we are the TTA Center. Talk to us. So as we're kind of continuing to go on, I wanted to again highlight some of the resources that we have as a TTA Center. So as we went through the work plan, we saw that there's a lot of very specific requirements. The Training and Technical Assistance Center exists to help you fill in developmental or resource gaps as you're trying to fulfill those requirements. So again, I want to highlight that we have onboarding videos on the website that give you some historical information, very introductory EIE 101 info. Every EIE provider should be looking at these. Again, you don't even need to use the password to look at them. They're also in the process of being onboarded. I cannot say enough. Again, the EIE law is the one that was just recently updated, and the primary prevention and training. So if you have a staff member that is struggling to understand the difference between primary and secondary prevention, then that video is for them. And again, it's already on the website. Looking at these onboarding videos first will then set us up for more success as we get into the direct enough is enough onboarding. So again, you have access for the TTA Center. We can onboard your EIE provider, and we really should be contacted ASAP. We'll get to that on the next slide, but we can have that discussion with them of what is EIE, what additional questions that you have. So as a manager, one of your biggest tools is within the first week that you have hired a new EIE provider is putting them in contact with us so that we can go ahead and start getting them trained and asking all those questions while they're new. Again, we can also do ongoing technical assistance, request a meeting, or post questions to the portal. Multiple toolkits and templates that are added to the website with resources. And you can also suggest a resource. Here is a form where if there was something that you would like to support your work, let us know. Again, if you need a template, if there's something, if you need help crafting emails or just need more models or examples, I created this form so that you didn't have to schedule a meeting or send an email. You can just let us know. Maybe you also have someone in mind who would be a great workshop speaker. You yourself could provide a great workshop. This form is also designed where if you want to recommend yourself or your agency to provide a workshop, that you can do that here. So again, this is a resource for you all. So now we're going to get into our information around onboarding providers and then closing out with supervising providers. I'll do my best to kind of just spend about maybe just 10-ish, maybe 10-ish minutes on here. I want to have more times for questions and we can always go back. So my goal is not to rush, but I want to make sure that you all have space with some face time with Clarissa to answer questions. So we've touched on onboarding, but I wanted to have this piece right here to say, what at the very kind of bare minimum, what are some things that you all should be doing over time? So within the first week, the agency orientation, understanding what it means to work at your agency, and then reviewing the EIE onboarding videos and developing questions, saying what doesn't make sense. Sometimes some folks just let me know, I don't know what I don't know. And that's a data point. So just getting clear, or they're like, I'm overwhelmed by Title IX. Oh, that's because you think that you're supposed to be only a Title IX expert, and that's not your role. So we do some myth busting. Updating OPDV that you have a new staff member and someone who needs to be added to emails, and then introducing your member to the TTA staff and scheduling that onboarding session and reviewing the work plan. Even if it doesn't make sense, continuing to get them comfortable with the work plan. Then within the first month, then reviewing some agency institutional records. Going back and looking at the MOUs, the grant reports, and the other information on how you all have been able to fulfill EIE work over the last 3 years to paint a fuller picture, as well as some of those handoff meetings. And then attending campus events and building relationships. I share with folks all the time that sometimes it is best for a provider to simply go to a couple of events to be a familiar face before they try to put on a workshop. So strategically, if there is a sexual assault activist group on campus or a group of volunteers, working with them, and looking for events that are community events. Not every event at a campus is just for them. Sometimes they'll have an open forum around a recent incident or various things. So that needs assessment will also help you get familiar with understanding the campus calendar and identifying an event that you should attend to just be there. I think it's always easier also for especially non-responsive schools, if you start showing up in person and meeting people, it's much more easier to follow up on, hey, it was great to meet you last week. I've been trying to connect with, I'd love to come to your class. Like it's doing that very original outreach where people can, it's putting the human contact back into outreach that was interrupted during COVID, and setting smart goals. Then within the first 6 months or first semester, there should be a really strong understanding of the campus contacts and at least where to locate the needed information. Sometimes providers are thinking that, oh my God, now I just graduated and now I have to be an expert in campus violence prevention in 6 months. No, you don't. You simply have to be someone who's resourceful and has an attitude that you're willing to figure where information is out. We also see that, as someone mentioned before, there's an ever evolving, changing landscape of how campuses are responding, how they're labeling, where their intentions are. So I don't know if it's even humane to try to think you could keep up at the moment's notice with all of it, but you should know where to locate it. Where do students have their student bill of rights? Where is it posted? Where on the website? Where do they see it? Where do students go for housing accommodations? Where is the Title IX office? Just having an idea, or how do you find it? How do you work the campus map? And then within the first full year, you should be able to look back at the previous year and then identify skills and knowledge gaps as well as successes. This work is a very nuanced, so it takes some time to think, what skills do I need to be better? And not even better, effective. What skills do I need to be more personable? What skills do I need? We all have skills that we are really great at and some things that we can work on. As a manager, helping your EIE provider see where they could work on their skills, but not being demoralized by not having that yet and focusing on the successes too, helps them kind of move, I think, out of the idea or the mode between a job and a career. And finally, having a strong grasp on the campus climate and the needs and where EIE can fill the gaps. Again, this does not mean that you are filling all of the campus's gaps in 1 year. But if I say, hey, I'm going to say Wichita State. That's not here, but that's my alma mater. Let's say, for example, I'm an EIE provider for Wichita State. I should then say, well, you know what? This is the climate. Generally, they're not, they have a couple of resources. They could use XYZ. It would be great if EIE could do XYZ. Thinking in a way where you're being able to think long-term goals and hold that larger mission, but knowing it takes kind of steps to get there. So if there's also additional onboarding resources that that would be supportive, fill out that form, let us know in the evaluation, but hopefully this will be a helpful resource on kind of getting started and helping you think, how do I start onboard a new EIE provider? So I wanted to kind of put 3 main objectives for onboarding as you're looking at it. Number 1, you should have an onboarding should show an understanding of the Enough is Enough program as a whole. As a macro, what does it mean to be enough is enough provider? Why does it matter? Why is it important that this was one of the first pieces of legislation in the country to develop something like this? And having a strong grasp of the program as a whole. Then understanding their role. So what does it mean then to be a person within that larger system, and how it fits in the larger context. And finally, some resources, knowing who to turn to for what and why, and knowing what you should be able to answer easily and what may require follow-up. So being able to identify which types of problems or which types of things should you be able to say off the tongue. Usually you should be able to say how to get in touch with Title IX, or how to get in touch with a hotline or some pieces. There may be some instances that require follow-up, and being okay and practicing saying, I need to follow up on that. Clarissa, would you add anything to the onboarding objectives or pieces on what agencies should make sure that they hone in on for their onboarding?
No, I think the only thing that I would add is that in that onboarding timeline that Trey shared, that is not something that you as a supervisor is solely responsible for. That is exactly where the TTA comes into place. Like there can be a conversation at the beginning as a supervisor, like, hey, I'm going to be getting ready to onboard somebody. Can we go over the timeline of where I can connect you to them and you can schedule these topics and I can cover these topics. Like we can collaborate with you to even that level, so that you don't feel like I'm responsible for providing this entire thing from beginning to end. There's things that literally would fall into the TTA to provide that level of support.
Thank you. I appreciate that addition. So now we're going to get into some spaces where I'll ask Clarissa a couple questions. She's going to share. Also, feel free. I'll be looking in the chat. So we're kind of getting now into our supervision aspect as we're kind of closing. As I mentioned, look, it's already 4:10, and then we have 20 minutes left. So Clarissa, I'd love to know for folks who are supervising staff, what types of questions should folks be asking? How often would you recommend meeting? What types of things should a supervisor be getting curious about when it comes to EIE staff?
Sure. So obviously we all come from different programs and we all follow different formats in terms of consistency of check-ins or supervisions. Ideally, at the beginning, you want to start meeting with them on a weekly basis and graduate to bi-weekly and then monthly and maybe quarterly for some programs. That is totally up to you. We also know and understand from different various enough is enough providers is that a lot of the people on the ground working are having dual responsibilities. So they're either an advocate and also a community educator. So ensuring that you just find the balance to ensure that however consistent your supervisions or check-ins are, that you're allotting time for just like enough is enough specific questions. A lot of it is like, what did your month look like? What did your last week look like, right? What presentations did you do? Did you have evaluations? Have you reviewed the evaluations? I think that that's always a good starting point if you're talking to somebody who's already on the ground doing the work, kind of setting trainings. But if you're like in the initial stages of onboarding, is if you did have the historical institutional knowledge and you share that, like what are some thoughts, right? Like just reviewing that. But if you didn't have that, a good practice that I've always practiced with boarding new staff is like, let's go over each of the schools that we work with and let's grade them in terms of like partnership. Like this is an 8+ school, like we have an MOU, we consistently do their training for all their freshmen. We do trainings for their RAs. We have a great conversation. We have a great relationship with the Title IX coordinator. And then maybe another school is like a C-. The Title IX coordinator is, always in and out. We don't have necessarily any MOU with them. We do not have any set standard trainings with them, but sometimes they kind of reach out to us on one-off trainings where they want us to do like a specific tabling event and things like that. Kind of allowing you grading each of the schools, it's helpful so that people can know where their efforts should be and they can also kind of map out, okay, well, this is like the A+ school where I'm gonna make sure that the needs assessments are always done. I'm gonna be making sure that I have communication with them. And then the C- school, maybe I need to have more communication with them of sending them a menu of our programs, a menu of our trainings, sending them a quarterly email at the beginning of the semester, in the middle of the semester, at the end of the semester to just check in. So you kind of just want to get an understanding of what is it that their day-to-day looks like, what are the efforts and where their barriers and challenges are so that you can identify and bring it back to the work plan. I think that those are helpful questions to start asking at the beginning of any supervision, and also providing the support, right? Like, are you getting a lot of disclosures after your presentation from students? If you are not an advocate and you're just a community educator and that rec service portion doesn't come naturally, is there training opportunities where you can tap into that? Is there a referral process within your agency or other agencies so that that person doesn't feel like I'm wearing a dual hat in certain spaces? So just checking in what their day-to-day looks like and where they are with each school is really, really important.
Thank you. And Clarissa, what types of common challenges do EIE providers have? Like what should people maybe be expecting or anticipating when it comes to challenges and opportunities?
The big one is always going to be the turnover with the administrative staff of the schools that they're working with. I'm sure that you've all either have heard this or have experienced it directly when you're trying to intervene and provide support. That's a common challenge of like making sure, I think Trey, you have mentioned this at the beginning, like the Title IX coordinator is not the only point of contact with any school. You can start working with student leaders. You can start working with volunteer groups. You can just start tabling at a health fair first and kind of getting yourself known in the campus, whether with students, administrative staff. Sometimes it's a professor that asks you to come and do a 1 hour training on consent because they're teaching a class on survivors and things like that. So really kind of scoping out that the Title IX coordinators or administrative staff are not the only point of contact, or not the only people that are gonna be people who are going to wheel you in and make you somebody who's going to be a resource to the campus. And also like balancing workload, because we often hear from providers that enough is like 50% of the workload, right? And we are advocates and we're on call, and managing those expectations and being realistic about what you can say yes to and what you can say no to is really important. And supporting your staff and knowing that they're the experts in their day to day. So having backup plans, I think oftentimes we see like, oh my God, I'm not going to call out because I have this training scheduled for tomorrow and the school has not been responsive. And so that then results in like burnout, right? So what is the backup process if somebody can't make it? Do you guys have does the organization or your program have a standard template of a presentation that anybody in the organization can step in or can do a part of the presentation? I think that that's really helpful. Sometimes people, when they feel supported, they also feel like they can tap into different resources, or like, what is your cancellation process? Sometimes we often hear schools who are frustrated with people canceling last minute or not being able to show up. So being very direct with that and having those backup plans are really, really important. And just being prepared for like the constant changes of campuses, like, and within student groups, like you can talk to a student group today and then tomorrow another student group is leading another different initiative at the school. So navigating that that navigating that your response is to the entire school and not to necessarily one particular student group or one administrator, and keeping your presentations unbiased in that sense, and really like tapping into the TTA when you don't know an answer, when you don't know what's happening, when you're consistently seeing barriers, whether the school is not communicating or they're not interested in the needs assessments, tapping into your TTA to provide that additional support.
Thank you. I also wanted to uplift that Dulcie shared in the chat. It's also helpful to ask your main contact at the college who's a secondary contact. This is also something that you can really delineate in those annual meetings. When you're going through when meeting with campuses, hey, who are the people that I can talk to when you have a busy caseload, when you have something else going on? Who else has the authority, or the power to help me book these rooms? Who can be there to help me? So anticipating that, if your campus contact, for example, is a counseling center, they're going to be busy around certain times of year. So supervisors can also help think about and anticipate what those timeline challenges look like as well.
Yeah, and I think Trey, you
Go on.
mentioned it earlier on, in terms of like being aware of the student culture and the culture of the school, signing up for their newsletters, signing up for if they have a newspaper, like all of those things will keep you in the loop of what's going on that you might not have insight, either directly from administrative staff or students, but it's a way in to kind of understand a little bit about the culture.
Thank you. And I think those types of activities help you not be stuck in the heaviness of it all. It can be very like generative to read what the campus is highlighting, these other activities to see how folks are showing up instead of sometimes being caught in this trap of I do a training, people disclose. I do a training, they disclose, and that's all my job is giving, 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 and I don't have anything bringing me back. I think we kind of already discussed this, so I'll kind of just talk about this slide. In terms of challenges, this is arranged in both outward-facing challenges and inward-facing. So I wanted to kind of give you all some titles, and as you're thinking about what skills that maybe you may have or may need to develop or work together, that these are kind of a lot of little like suggested webinar titles or suggested things for you to kind of build up. And I also wanted to share a resource the Pennsylvania Coalition Against Rape. They have I went to this webinar recently. They have a really great toolkit, a 30-page toolkit called the Guide to Trauma-Informed Supervision. Is designed for supervisors and managers at victim service agencies. It also kind of defines what is supervision and what is it's not. Supervision isn't case management. It's not therapy. So what does that kind of leave us with? And then some tools that you can use. I like that they have an agreement that you can sign with your staff member about supervision and some worksheets. So wanted to kind of amplify that resource. So Clarissa, thinking about then what does it mean to be a support system for your EIE provider? What type of support does a team need from a supervisor? What should a supervisor be able to say, here, I have that for you, or at least I can help you get there?
Yeah, I think the most important thing and what I often see with providers is that sometimes providers get really attached to a school or a student organization. And as a supervisor, you kind of have to wheel them back to our limited role in this space. Because sometimes you'll get like providers will get very creative, or they'll get these big asks of like, I want you to do and run a whole conference for me surrounding consent. It's like, wait, time out. We don't do that. This is actually, kind of bringing them back and setting those very clear strategic goals that you probably built at the beginning of your onboarding and making sure that they're sticking to that. I think sometimes we tend to see people over promising or doing more than what our role is allowed to. And so we're seeing people become overachievers, and that's how they're burning out as well. So as a supervisor, bringing them back to the work plan, like how does this fit the work plan? There's always a level that you want to encourage creativity, but you also want to bring it back to and holding them accountable to tracking and reporting that progress. Sometimes, often, what we see from progress reports is that it doesn't tell a story. Like from quarter one to quarter two, it's like, are these two different organizations and two programs? Because it doesn't flow. So when you're writing your quarter two report, you should really go back at the things that you said in quarter one that like were challenging, and how did you address those challenges in quarter two, and not treat them as independent reports, but like they're supposed to tell a story, so that at the end of the year, your annual report is pretty much done. You're highlighting and you're taking from what you mentioned in quarter one, quarter two. So just that planning accountability is important, and just consistency and providing the support of like, what is it that you need from me? Consistently asking that question, because that might change from time to time, or you might think you know what that person needs, but letting them identify what those needs are from you as a supervisor is important. And then you'll probably get tired of hearing this from us, but like tapping into your TTA, like anything that you don't know the answer to, or things or things that are coming up in supervision that you cannot directly answer, tap into the TTA.
Thank you. And what that means too, so maybe it means that you want to meet with Clarissa and myself and go over a supervision. Like we can meet with you and go over very specifically what exactly that you need. And then finally, as we mentioned, we don't have a lot of time. Staff is limited, and then there's massive turnover. How would you suggest maximizing time amidst these challenges that sometimes seem never ending?
I think from the different points that we've already talked about, but like cross trainings, making sure that you're utilizing the website, that you're building community with other in-office and no providers. One of the things that you mentioned, Trey, at the beginning of the training was this is not a competition, right? Like there could be multiple programs working with the same school. And so how can we cross collaborate with one another? How can we tap in and do some strategic planning? I can highlight Long Island, for example. All their programs have like a menu where they share that menu with all the schools that they're working with. And you say, like, if you're looking for RA training, this is the program that you reach out to. If you're looking for freshman 101 orientation training, this is the program you should. Those are different ways that you can collaborate. So making sure that you let the staff that you're working with know that you don't have to overwork yourself, right? That as long as you're showing effort and you're showing the consistency in reaching out to the schools and engaging with the schools, that is what we're asking at the end of it. It's like the student safety, right? That's the most important. How are we managing and exploring that? Does not mean that we have to do 20 presentations. The other thing is the use of social media. That's one of the biggest sins in the quarterly reports. Like, what are some social media strategies, outreach strategies? Like, cross collaboration with other programs, right? Within your programs is really important. You can do some social media events with other programs that cross or intersect with some of the Enough is Enough initiatives. So just kind of thinking outside the box so that people don't feel alone, because that's what we hear often is that people feel very isolated in this work because nobody else in their agency is doing this level of work.
Thank you so much. And I really want to amplify that, as you mentioned, to seek out TTA during transitions. These turnovers can be really exciting moments at a campus when they're a new staff. They're eager to show what they can do. They're eager to kind of have something work out. When we have new providers, they're eager to have to work. So I think this turnover moment can be a very juicy moment to maximize excitement if there hasn't been any traction somewhere. So wanted to kind of amplify, as we're kind of coming to the close, some updating dates and deadlines to keep in mind. Our regional calls will be in a couple of weeks. You'll be receiving invitations soon. All of the regional calls are right here to kind of keep that in mind. This is where your provider meets with the TTA team in their region. We have updates, we have resources we'll be sharing when we have posted these trainings to the website. This is also the space for your EIE provider or yourself to come and talk with other folks about challenges. Bring a question, bring an issue, say, hey, I'm going to post this to the group, bring a collaboration opportunity. So this is that moment to maximize collaboration. Everyone's quarter two reports are due November 30th for the August 1st to 10/31. I have been thinking there are 30 days all October. There are 31 days. So I'm all up. So your quarter two reports are due soon. And then soon you'll also be getting invitations for November training, an updated calendar for 2025. And we're finalizing some information to have some general onboarding sessions. So we'll be having a date in December and February where I will be facilitating a kind of come get onboarded. I'll be asking that folks have already looked at the videos and kind of met a little bit. So this session will be more about, hey, I have some type of idea of enough is enough, but I need to either get clear in this content or get clear in my facilitation or a skill. So there will be a questionnaire that folks will have to fill out because I will be adjusting those sessions to the information in the room, but also it'll be publicly available to where folks who are there is really a space to kind of just say, hey, we're available to answer those questions. If you haven't been able to attend programming, just come get plugged in here. So with that, I want to thank you all for attending. We have a couple minutes now left for questions. What I'll do is I'll stop the screen share so that we can see each other. Clarissa has already put the evaluation link in the inside of the chat. But really would just love for everyone to fill this out. There's space to also share additional questions or recommendations. But thank you all so much for sharing your Wednesday afternoon with us for 90 minutes. I hope that this was helpful. And please feel free to now put some questions in the chat that we can maximize the time that while we're here. But just want to thank you all so much for attending.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And if you want, you can send questions directly to me and I can post them to the greater group as well. But yeah.
Not hearing any questions, so I'm going to go ahead and end the recording now, just so we have it.